it's Sandra. Welcome to another episode of Asexualise, my asexual life. This is a place to be for education about asexuality, all things asexual, and I share my asexual life journey in order to help you in yours. So don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon right now. So happy Asexual Perspectives Awareness Month. I did promise you that I would do some live streams regarding Asexual Perspectives Awareness Month. So what is Asexual Perspectives Awareness Month? So Asexual Perspectives Awareness Month is to celebrate our diversity across the asexual spectrum and our differences within it. And I founded this month in 2017 when I published my Asexual Perspectives book, which, like the special month I've described, celebrates our diversity across the asexual spectrum and our differences within it. Now, if you're new to asexuality, this is a book for you. If you don't understand the asexual spectrum, this is also the book for you. Because in this book, I reveal 47 different asexual perspectives about love, life, and sex from an asexual point of view. This includes my own perspective and 46 other asexuals around the globe and across the asexual spectrum. Now, the asexual spectrum is so vast and wide that not every single subcategory of asexuals are in the book, because there's more than 46. 47, including me. And some asexuals identify in a similar sort of way in this book. But this does give you a very, very good overview of the different types of asexuals you could come across. And I believe there's a story in here, a real life story for every type of asexual to resonate with somehow. So tonight I'm going to be reading, or today, whatever time it is where you are, I'm going to be reading from this book. And today we're going to be discussing, can a relationship with a sexual and asexual work or not? And is it fair? This is taken from my book. If you want to get a copy of this book, you can go to Amazon, type in Asexual Perspectives, and it will come up. And also you should be able to order it from all good bookshops. So I'll be reading this, and let's dive into this topic and see what Robin has to say. Do you believe if a sexual person had a relationship with an asexual, it can work? And what do you think about it being fair or not? I think it really depends on the people involved. I know a few asexual relationships in which the sexual person, out of respect for their asexual partner, does not ever have sex with their asexual partner. However, I don't think the majority of sexual people are like that. Even those who respect the asexual partners wish to not have sex would still want to have sex, and so a form of compromise with their asexual partner about it. Oh, and so form a compromise. Did I say that? With their asexual partner about it. For example, agreeing on the amount of sex to have within a certain time period. Agreeing on the amount of sex. So I said, for example, agreeing on the amount of sex to have within a certain time period. So the amount of sex does not overwhelm the asexual partner. I think this is really important, because even if an asexual is prepared to have sex in a relationship, if they're sex positive or okay with sex or indifferent, then usually the asexual partner does not want sex or to participate as often as a sexual person would. So a heterosexual person, for example, would probably want sex a lot more than an asexual partner would. So I think it is really important that if an asexual is prepared to have sex and okay with having sex, that the sexual is mindful that their sex drive is probably likely a lot more higher. Some asexuals don't have a sex drive at all, others do. And usually with asexuals, their sex drive isn't aimed at anyone because they're asexual. So if they don't experience a sexual attraction, then it'll be like their sex drive is really driving themselves in an arousal way rather than aimed at anyone. That's basically the difference. Asexual arousal and sex drive, if you like, is not aimed at anyone usually. However, there are grey asexuals who can experience sexual attraction, but just under limited, rare, or specific circumstances, or experience it, but not enough to want to act on it. So those asexuals, they would experience sexual attraction in those circumstances, but it wouldn't be the usual type of sexual attraction. So therefore, if they are a demisexual, for example, so they only experience sexual attraction once a deep emotional connection has been formed, maintained, and sustained, then within that relationship, they could be fine with having sex as much as their sexual partner wants it, because they might feel exactly the same way, but they're still on the asexual spectrum because they couldn't just do that normally with anyone or in the usual amount, because it's their demisexuality that stops them from being able to do that with other people. In general, a demisexual might just experience a deep emotional connection with a handful of people their whole entire life, and only those people might they be able to have sex with. I met a demisexual a number of years ago at one of my asexual meetups, and he'd only ever felt that way about one person before. So you've got to take this into consideration, and it's very important. So always ask the asexual person, like what they feel about sex, what they think about it. Don't take it for granted. Every asexual person is different. But if we go back to what Robin's saying, in other words, an asexual who wishes to have a relationship with a sexual partner should expect to have sex in the majority of cases. That's his opinion, or their opinion, because I shouldn't say what gender they are, because it's better to, refrain from saying that unless I know the person personally. So as much as it depends on what the sexual partner wants, it also depends on what the asexual person is willing and able to tolerate in terms of sex. I also know that some asexual people do enjoy sex. So in that case, having sex with their sexual partner at their request may not be a problem at all. You often find that with asexuals that do not mind having sex, usually it's still the sexual person that would instigate sex first. In most cases, not all. Right. So, Cassidy's story. If you've got the book, follow along. Page 60, Cassidy's story. And don't forget to get a book yourself on Amazon, Asexual Perspectives. So, Cassidy's story. Do you believe if a sexual person had a relationship with an asexual, it can work? And what do you think about it being fair or not? I'm in one and it's working. As far as fair goes, life isn't fair. This is what I mean when I said sex is put on this pedestal. Okay, so there's one thing that we both don't like. Big deal. He doesn't like drawing. I don't like Magic the Gathering, a trading card game. He doesn't like musicals. I don't like first-person shooters. And we love each other. And we have an amazing life with great friends, a beautiful daughter, dogs, and more love than we know what to do with. So I don't want sex. Big deal. So yeah, I do think that although it's not a big deal someone doesn't want sex, I think it's very important and essential to discuss sex with any potential partner. I do believe that asexuals should be very open and honest in their bios on dating sites and should say they're asexual, but still a lot of people don't understand what that is, so you have to spell it out. If you're an asexual that doesn't want sex, you'll need to say, look, I'm not interested in sex because I'm asexual in sexual orientation. I lack sexual attraction. I'm not interested in having sex ever if you're not. You need to make it clear on dating sites, because a lot of people think the word asexual means you're a highly sexual person if they don't know what the word asexual means. Well, because I have asexual on my profile, I attract really sexual guys who want a lot of sex because they think I'm advertising that I'm a sexual person, where I'm not. I'm absence of sexual attraction. A in front of the sexual basically stands for absence of sexual attraction. So yeah, it's really important that people are told up front about your asexuality, because obviously the sexual person can feel very cheated and deceived and betrayed if you are keeping your asexuality from them. However, if you find partway through the relationship you're asexual, then you have to have an honest, open discussion. And yes, that person might leave you, but you have to come to the reality of the situation rather than what you wished it would be. You can't keep thinking, what if, and just hide that part of yourself from them, because that's not fair to you or them. It needs to be out in the open. And sometimes we have to risk losing someone in order to get a better life for ourselves. If we can't even be honest and open with the people we love and care about, then it's not really a healthy relationship anyway. It's quite a toxic one. So you need to be very open and honest about your situation, about how you feel and what you think. But then so does a sexual person. It's hard because the sexual person does need to also say how they feel about sex and not having it, or having very little of it. You need open, honest discussion between both people. Like, if the person's really happy with not having sex if you don't want sex, if you're going to be happy knowing you can't give that person sex if you don't want sex. Like, is that going to play on your mind and in the relationship, or is it going to be okay? You have to work that out between you and for yourself as well. So page 117, D story. Do you believe a sexual person and an asexual can work in a relationship, and what do you think about being fair or not? First of all, I'm certainly no authority on working relationships. In fact, asexuality aside, sometimes I doubt if any relationship can truly work. But cynicism aside, I think it can work in cases. For one, every relationship has its sticking point, and as I understand it, sex drive mismatch is a common problem even among sexual folks. I think it's important that the sexual individual be very comfortable not having sex, or the asexual person be very comfortable having it, ideally both. Yeah, so my relationships have basically been with heterosexual guys, so I understand how I was going to say understand how sexuals work and asexuals work. I understand the different dynamics. But I think it is hard, because some sexuals could say they're fine about not having sex and then do it behind the asexual's back, and not be able to actually deliver on what they say. And I do know that some asexuals decide that they'll not tell the person that they're seeing that they're asexual till they've known them a number of months or time. And that's not fair on the sexual person because they get attached. So you've got to understand it's not fair for the asexual to hide their asexuality. It's not fair that for an asexual to hide their sexuality from a sexual person, just like it's not fair for a sexual person to hide their true feelings if they really want sex from an asexual. It's not fair if either person isn't being honest. They both need to be honest. Honest, open communication is a key foundation to any healthy relationship, no matter what sexual orientation you are, no matter whether you're heterosexual, bisexual, pansexual, homosexual. You have to be honest. Asexuals need to be honest, and so do heterosexuals. So, right. Sappho's story. I think more than any other kind of relationship, communication is key here. The most important thing is that both members of the relationship feel content and satisfied. Whether this means being in a trusting, open relationship, being polyamorous, the asexual person agreeing to sex despite lack of interest, or anything else. As long as both people within the relationship are happy, that is a way to make it fair. And I do agree that both people should feel happy and both people should feel satisfied. I personally would not be happy with an open relationship. I would rather be single forever than be with someone who's in a relationship with me and someone else. I don't want that at all, because I wouldn't like that. You know what I mean? I don't like sharing in that way. So I'd rather be single forever. And I might very well be single forever because I do enjoy my own company and I do like being single. There's huge benefits to it. Right. So, Katie's story, do you believe if a sexual person had a relationship with an asexual, it can work? And what do you think about it being fair or not? Yes, I think a situation like that could work. It really comes down to how honest the people are about their needs and what they can compromise on. If they could meet in the middle, they would definitely find a solution. So I think that's the crux of the matter, if you can meet in the middle. But if the asexual person is sex repulsed and the heterosexual, for example, person really wants sex, then I don't see how they can meet in the middle, right? We need to find people who want the same type of relationship as us to be compatible with us. There's no point in forcing one person to be like us, right? Or there's no point in wishing and fantasizing that the other person was like us. This goes for both ways. Some heterosexuals, for example, they fall deeply in love with asexuals, but it hurts them that they're not having sex and their asexual partner doesn't want sex because they really want that with the asexual person. It deeply hurts the asexual person that the heterosexual person, for example, needs to have sex in order to feel like the full spectrum of love or in order to be in a relationship with them. It hurts them both. So this is just incompatibility, right? If two people want the opposite things and they can't come to a compromise and they don't want to meet in the middle, then even if they wanted to because they love each other, but they really can't bring themselves to this no go way going to be a healthy relationship. You need to part ways and find someone who's more compatible. It's better to be single and on your own and happy than be in a relationship that's unhealthy. A healthy relationship means you both have to talk to each other, open communication. Like there might be ways around it where the asexual's fine with foreplay and touching and even maybe masturbation, but penetration's just never going to happen. And the sexual person might be okay with just having that so long as they can come, basically. Like some heterosexuals, they have different ways of having sex. Some heterosexuals like like sexual stuff being done to their anatomy rather than intercourse between vagina and penis, for example. Some of them really dig that, right? They get more pleasure out of that, right? So you gotta ask the person like what they really like. Of course, don't start asking on dating sites like, how do you like to be pleasured? This is not what I'm talking about, right? But you have to be very, very careful about how you go about phrasing things. But you've got to have open, honest communication. But if you're a person that doesn't want sex ever and you're asexual, then if you're on dating sites, make it clear. I make it clear. Does it mean my matches go down? Of course it does. Of course I'm not going to get that many matches. And even if I do, it doesn't mean to say they've read my bio. A lot of heterosexuals, for example, on dating sites, they do not read your bio. So you have to keep checking in with them. Like even if you've got the bio, you have to say, did you read my bio? So it's very important to check they've actually read the bio, even if you've written it, and not just assume. And also ask them if they are monogamous. Don't assume that everyone's monogamous. I run asexual dating groups on Facebook, and there's been some people in there that are polyamorous, and I do allow polyamorous asexuals into the groups as well as monogamous asexuals because I think it's only fair. And some asexuals like a polyamorous relationship, right? But it means you've got to ask them. Don't assume, because you might think everyone's monogamous, but they're not. Right, so Jen Mullen's story, asexual perspective, right? Do you believe if a sexual person had a relationship with an asexual, it can work? And what do you think about it being fair or not? So Jen says an allosexual and asexual can have a relationship, but it's best if they enter the relationship with the knowledge of whether or not they will be having sex. I totally agree with this. I knew an ace who realized he was ace while in a relationship, and his girlfriend was rather unhappy and frequently tried to get him to do sexual stuff with her anyway. They end up breaking up as long as they both entered the relationship without conflicting expectations. I think it's fair. Yeah, I think that's the point. Like, it's not fair if neither of the people are being honest about the relationship and what they want. It's not fair. in order to have any healthy relationship, you do have to have open, honest communication about how you're both feeling. And if you can both have a relationship where needs are met in some way satisfactorily, so you're not going to resent each other or be emotionally upset all the time or struggle and be in pain, emotional pain or even physical, then that's great. But if you are just incompatible, they want sex, you never want sex, that's not going to work. And you have to be realistic about it. Right? We have to live with the reality, not the fantasy of what we wish that person to be. And if that person does want sex and loves it and you don't, you have to be honest with yourself about that and understand that's the way it is. Yes, it might feel horrible, it might feel cruel, it might feel upsetting. And I understand from an asexual point of view that it can be so like disheartening. Like, why can't that person just love me without sex? Why can't they love me for my personality? Can't they love me for my intelligence, my emotional connection? Why can't they love me for so many things, but I just don't want sex? But then the sexual person will be like, well, I really enjoy sex. I really want it as part of a relationship. And, they can get it from other people. So I think that for people to be happy, they have to be compatible, no matter what sexual orientation they are. They have to be compatible, but they have to work on a relationship. In order for people to have a successful romantic relationship or a friendship, they need to be able to grow as individuals and grow together in the relationship. It's very important. If one person grows faster than the other, then they could leave the other person behind. If they grow apart because their needs are different, then that's going to be horrible. But if the needs were always different in the first place and they just weren't accepting that and realizing that it's too much pain to be in the relationship, a relationship should be healthy, it shouldn't be painful, you should have more happy times together than sad times, then you're doing yourself a disfavor and they're doing themselves a disfavor, right? We have to realize that we need the reality, not the fantasy. And there's a lot of people that just aren't compatible in any sexual orientation relationship. But with asexuals and sexuals, for example, there's a huge fundamental difference between us both. Now, if a sexual person is really okay with not having sex and an asexual person really doesn't want sex, then it could work. But those people are few and far between. In my experience, a lot of the heterosexuals that say they're okay with not having sex, I think they're fine temporarily being like that. But if you ask them if they would be okay being like that forever, some will still say yes, and they don't really mean that. Others are just having a good time with you as they are, and they're not really going to be with you forever anyway. And then others might lie and others might tell the truth. There's some people that will be okay without sex, but they are few and far between. So I think you've got to be discerning and see if they are telling the truth. If, for example, you go to a dating site and they say, I'm fine with not having sex, and all of a sudden the conversation gets very sexual and or what you like to do sexually, then you know that that person is hankering after sex and sexual activity because they're gearing the conversation towards that. They can't help themselves. I've had guys on dating sites literally say to me, oh, I'm fine without sex. Then in the next breath, they're like, so what do you like doing sexually then? It's like, do you know what I mean? It's like it's just a joke, really. It's not a joke because it's not funny in the sense that it's messing with people's lives and emotions, but it's just a joke in the sense of like, you've just said to me you're not interested in sex and you're talking sexually to me already. It's just a lie. Do you know? It's a blatant lie. So we have to understand that a lot of people do lie. They don't tell the truth, especially if they're desperate to get into a relationship or have a date. And let's face it, in the dating world these days, there are a lot of desperate people out there, including a lot of desperate sexuals who will go on a date, even with an asexual person who might say they don't want sex or does say they don't want sex. But at the end of the day, they might not believe us. I've had guys that have had dates and they've not believed in asexuality. They haven't believed it's true. They've never heard of it. They think it's not real. And they just think I'm saying stuff for the hell of it, right? And then I've had other guys that do take it seriously, but there's some guys that say they're fine without sex, but it's not true. They're just saying it to appease me. They're just saying it because they want a date, because they'd rather date someone than no one. There's a lot less chance of guys, for example, getting dates on dating apps than there is a woman usually, because a woman usually statistically, from my research, has more options with guys. So if you're female and there's lots of female asexuals and you have like guys after you, it might just be because they are running out of sexual options and sadly you're another option to them. You know, like on Badoo, for example, they're like swipe 50 times, Badoo says, to find your match. And there will be some guys that will swipe and see you and might want to date with you, even if you say you don't want sex. And they love sex because they want a date, because everyone wants human connection usually, and they want to feel being with someone, you know? So even if a person's okay about not having sex on a date, or they say they're not, doesn't mean to say that they want that long term. You have to make sure that their long-term goals are the same as your long-term goals. Like, are they looking for a relationship if that's what you're looking for? How do they visualize that? How do they visualize living without sex for years and forever if you don't want sex ever? You know, you need to be asking these questions and see if they really are honest or not. Right? But it's very important. And even if we do love sexuals, you know, like there's some sexuals we do fall in love with, we have to really realize that we can only have a relationship with them if they are truly who they say they are, and they are truly willing to have the type of relationship we want. Like, I'm in Matthew Hussey's Love Life Club, and Matthew Hussey is the #1 world's confidence and dating coach. Like, he's the top bod, right? And I pay to be in his Love Life Club. And he said, in terms of sexual compatibility, it's best to find someone like yourself. And, you know, he knows I'm asexual in his group. So, in other words, you know, if you're going to have a relationship, it's better really to be with someone else who, if you don't want sex, doesn't want sex either. Because it's better to have the compatibility. Whatever relationship it is, with whoever it is, you've got to have compatibility. That's the #1 deciding factor as to whether the relationship will last long term, whether it's going to be a healthy relationship, or whether it's going to be fraught with trouble and worry and strife. So we've got to be looking for compatibility in terms of like marriage, kids, sex, where we want to be in a home. Do you want to live with a person? Not, you know, does that person want to travel around the world or move around the world? Where do you want to settle down? You know, and for some people, they want kids, right? And some asexuals even want children. And they have a biological clock, women do, that if they don't like have children by a certain age, then they can't have them anymore. But that age is different for everyone. And so it depends obviously on the individual, but a lot of the time, you know, there's certain women who do want kids, but there's even guys in the asexual community that want children. Obviously you can adopt, but some people that are asexual still want their own children by their own natural means, by having sex basically. But some asexuals will have sex to have children and never have sex again. So you've got to understand that if you're a sexual person as well. So if you come across a sexual person and they're interested in having a relationship with you, and vice versa, you do need to talk openly and honestly about how the relationship you would see working. Like, how would that work in practice, not just in fantasy, like, oh, I really love you, I feel so great when I'm with you, and all the rest of it. How would it work in practical terms? Like, when that sexual person wants sex and you don't, for example, what would they be doing? Would they be able to masturbate themselves? Would you want them to have some other form and means of a person doing that with them? I personally don't like that because I'm fiercely monogamous. But you know, like, how would the sexual person get their needs met if they needed sex and they had a high sex drive? Similarly, if the asexual person needed cuddles and kissing and the sex just turned them off, if their sexual partner became horny around them, for example, and they were kissing them, but they got very, very sexually turned on, which they couldn't help because it was natural, how would you react as an asexual person to that sexual person? Would you be okay because you understand that's a natural way of their body being? They're not doing it in a like perverted way, they're doing it in a natural way? Or would you take offense to that? You know, all these types of things have got to be discussed when you are entering a sexual and asexual relationship. You've got to be very honest and very open, right? If you're completely repulsed by sexual talk, but obviously the asexual as an asexual person, if you're completely repulsed by sexual talk, but the sexual person does have a lot of sexual urges and they can't come to you about that and talk to you about that because it makes you uncomfortable, that can still cause a rift, because in any healthy relationship, you've got to be able to talk. And if you can't talk about intimate things like that together and how it makes you feel having it or not having it, you're going to create a rift and build resentment with each other. We have to be able to have hard conversations in relationships, which I keep learning more and more how to do that myself, because I don't like conflict personally. I don't like having difficult conversations, but over the last year, I've had to have more and more hard conversations. Usually it's about my needs. I'm trying to express my needs in a better way so they can understand it, but also accommodating the other person's needs, seeing their side of things more, seeing how they feel more. So I think it's very, very essential that you become skilled in trying to have hard conversations and listening to the other person's needs as well as your own, and seeing if you can come to some sort of agreement where you're both happy. But if you're fundamentally different people in different places, it might not work. There's some people, for example, that I might have great friendship with, but they would not be suitable for a romantic relationship because their sexual needs are very different to mine, or their asexual needs even are very different to mine, right? That's the problem with the asexual dating scene, is many asexuals are very different to each other. We're different in our hobbies, our interests, we're different in our likes and dislikes for physical touching, and we live all across the globe. So that makes it very difficult to find someone for a relationship. So it's hard even with our own kind to find the right relationship. But I think if you can be with another asexual person, I think there's more chance of success if your asexual needs are similar. But obviously, if you've got different life goals, I've seen, for example, on dating sites that some asexuals, they want to travel, right? Or they want to move countries. So there's no point in starting a relationship with someone who wants to move countries unless you're prepared to move to that country with them. So other times, there's lots of asexuals that are very fixed in a certain location because they like their job, they like their home, they don't want to move. But a lot of the time, asexuals will need to move. One person at least will need to move to the other in order to have an asexual relationship with another asexual. A lot of the time, you're not going to find someone on your doorstep that's going to be compatible as an asexual to be in a relationship with. And I found it personally sad that in the asexual community itself, there's not much proactivity to get into a relationship. I feel that within the asexual community itself, a lot of asexuals look outside of the asexual community. For example, asexuals to be in a relationship, they get despondent that the sexuals are not compatible, and they don't think to actually look at the people within the dating groups on Facebook, for example, that they're in. They're kind of there thinking it's a community. They're not actually thinking, would I like to date anyone in this group? But dating groups are there for a purpose and a reason. The whole point is you're meant to be looking for people or a person to date. That's kind of why you should be in it. But a lot of asexuals, they get despondent with looking for a relationship with a sexual, and therefore they don't think to look for a relationship with another asexual in the groups. But even so, because we're all so different, spread out globally, it's very difficult to find someone compatible for a relationship. And it's no good just having a relationship online for the majority of people, because having a relationship online is not the same as having a person there in front of you 24/7, 365 days a year. Right? It's not the same as having an in-person relationship. It's a different type of relationship. So we have to be looking at compatibility in multiple areas of our life. But obviously, one of the fundamental things for a lot of people is sex, where they want it, a lot of it, a little bit of it, how often they want it. And if they don't want it at all, or they just want it to a certain degree, or they just want a sexual activity, And it's very important for a lot of sexuals to have sex in a relationship, but it's just as important for a lot of asexuals not to have that. So you have to be looking at compatibility. It's not just if you've got attraction for the person. It's not just if you've got love for the person. It's not just if you've got a sense you want to make it work. It's a sense of, can you make this work? How can you make it work? Is it possible for you to make it work and both people be happy and satisfied and fulfilled? Because in order to have a healthy relationship, the needs of both people need to be met as much as possible. Because what happens is, if they're not, it gets imbalanced, and then the resentment starts to happen, and you start to not speak to each other about your needs, and then eventually you either go off with other people, be very miserable in the relationship, have an up and down relationship, pent that emotion up, tell your friends or whatever, this person isn't doing blah 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 in the relationship, instead of talking to the person you're actually in a relationship with. It's very important to not gossip about your person, but to talk to your person if you've got a person. Right, I'm still single. Why am I single? Because I haven't found a compatible person, not a sexual person or an asexual person. You know, I have very unique tastes, very unique preferences, very unique when I say preferences, they're not preference as in, oh, I would like, they're more as in, I really need certain things in a relationship, you know. So there are preferences. You can get preferences like, oh, like it's sweaty in the UK. That's not a preference, being sweaty. But there are preferences, like when you're looking for a person, you should say, what is a nice to have, like, and what is a necessity. So kindness should be a necessity, you know, honesty, trust, all this type of thing. Is a person trustworthy? Are they faithful? Are they honest? Are they kind? Are they caring? A lot of people in relationships, they look for the wrong thing. They look for how much that person makes them feel excited, how much attention that person pays them, which obviously is important to have attention, don't get me wrong. But if you're having attention from the wrong type of person, the person that's not nice, or they're blow hot and cold with you, you don't know where you stand with them, that's not going to be a healthy relationship. So you need to assess the person based on their characteristics and character traits and personality, rather than their looks or where they live or their status, that type of thing. And then you need to address the short-term goals that they have for their life, and what are their long-term goals, what are their vision, does it fit in with your own vision for your life? And how would the relationship work on a day-to-day basis? Like with lifestyles, you can have very different lifestyles. I live very differently. This is like 2:30 a.m. now in the UK, right? I am happiest when I am in my personal power in the early hours of the morning, like now, right? I tried to go to sleep earlier recently. Yeah, I did, but it made me miserable because I'm not being me, right? It's just not who I am. I much prefer to be up to 4 a.m. in the morning and sleep at midday. It's my vibe, it's who I am. And to try and be something I'm not is not good. But obviously, if I was looking for a guy, I'd have to look for a guy who's also either up at night, or someone who I can meet in the middle of the day, if you know what I mean, at a certain time that works for both of us, to have video calls or to meet up with. And that can be very difficult. The last relationship I was in, the short-term relationship, the guy was on a completely different time schedule to me. He would get up really early at like 7. By 8 o'clock, he would like be finished with food. But by 10 o'clock, he would want to go to sleep. And like usually I'd be doing my best work in like the afternoon, evening to the morning. And so by having video call with him smack bang in the middle of my time I'd usually be working, I wasn't as productive working, you know? And then I can start to think, well, when am I going to do the stuff I need to do? When am I going to go shopping? Because I'd usually be like, sometimes I shop at like 9 o'clock at night. If he's video calling with me between 8 and 10 or whatever, then it's not suitable. I can't do my shopping. You know what I mean? So lifestyle is really important. People underestimate lifestyle, you know, but you've got to factor that in. You've got to factor your lifestyle in, your preferences, your sexual preferences, whether that's a lot or not. You've got to factor into the account their personality. Does it match yours? Does it complement yours? Like, I'm an extrovert, but I have some introverted tendencies. But two extroverts don't necessarily get on very well because they fight for the attention, the limelight, right? So an extrovert can work better with an ambivert or an introvert because you can complement each other. You don't have to be the same. You can complement each other. If, for example, a sexual person loves to have whatever done to their body, but the asexual person doesn't like being touched on a lot of their body, but they do want to give a lot of themselves to the body of the person, if you know what I mean. Maybe they don't want to have intercourse, but they like licking and touching and kissing and sucking or whatever. Then that could possibly work. If if the sexual's very like, do what you like, I like you being that way, but the sexual's very the sexual's getting their needs met, but the asexual's very reserved, like, I'm not interested in intercourse, but I'm happy to do this, that, and the other with you, right? So some asexuals might be into some BDSM type of stuff without the intercourse, for example, and some sexuals may like that. Some sexuals may have a preference for certain types of sexual acts over sexual intercourse that the asexual isn't prepared to do anyway, but they like the sexual acts, they're fine with the sexual acts. So, and there are some people who are sexuals who kind of get a thrill out of not having sex. They kind of like I don't think there's that many people, but they're kind of like their kink is to be restrained from having sex. But even with some of those people, they still want sex at a certain time. They just want to be restrained from having it for a succession of times to make themselves more horny or whatever. So you got to be careful. You know what I mean? I'm not really into kinky stuff and BDSM. I don't really like that. It pretty much turns me off. But if the person's kink works with your asexual preferences or feelings or needs, then that could work well. Do you know what I mean? You might find some strange, different type of compatibility there. There might be certain circumstances where a sexual person has got a disability that stops them having sex, and an asexual person might be able to give them the relationship that the sexual person never thought they'd have because their physical disability stops them from having sex and they thought they'd never get a partner, and the asexual person can provide the relationship of their dreams but without the intercourse. You know what I mean? This is different types of relationships that could possibly work. Some people have illnesses that prevent them having sex and stuff like this. Some people have like certain conditions and stuff. So just think that there are different variations in life. Variety is the spice of life, as they say. But at the end of the day, if you've got a person who's sexual, really loves sex, a person who's asexual, really hates sex, that's not compatible. Don't be going for someone who's the total opposite of you, even though opposites attract, right? If a sexual person really wants sex, you're an asexual person who can't stand sex, that's not compatible. Stop even going together and look for someone else. Stop wasting each other's time. There's no point in wasting each other's time. It's a blunt thing to fact, right? If you want any more help with love life and sex from an asexual point of view, grab a copy of Asexual Perspectives on Amazon or ask for it at any good bookshop to order it. And it goes through 47 different asexuals and all the different types of questions you could possibly think of when you're new to asexuality, the asexual spectrum, or you're just curious to know more, right? It asks questions like, what do asexuals think of BDSM? What do they think of kinks? What do they think of porn? What do they think of masturbation? What's the difference between sexual attraction and sexual arousal? What's the difference between sexual attraction and sexual desire? It's all here in this book. And they give advice to other asexuals as well. So you can't go wrong, really. And if you're an asexual person who's got other asexual friends who don't have this book yet, tell them to grab a copy. If you're a sexual person watching this and you want to know more about asexuality, grab yourself a copy as well. I'd love to hear from you. Take care. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an episode. And see you soon on the next video or live stream. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up if you like it and subscribe. Take care. Lots of love. Bye.